Howdy folks, and welcome to the video. Today we are going to be talking about the top 10 reasons that you should get back into World of Warcraft for Dragonflight. We're going to try to keep this video short and sweet, so let's jump right into it. The first reason is that there is a Final Fantasy XIV approach with some Guild Wars 2 features, and Blizzard has finally gone back to what originally made them great by stealing things from other games, polishing them, and adding them to World of Warcraft, instead of trying to develop new things from scratch. Some of the standouts include the new leveling experience. So just like is true in Final Fantasy XIV, now the story campaign is the only questing that you actually have to do on a character to get from level 60 to max level, which right now is 70. The biggest difference here is that in previous expansions, you would have needed to sort of do most of the quests in a zone before moving on to the next zone, and that's how you're going to level. Generally, you're mixing in things like dungeons, the actual story campaign, random side quests, whatever you can sort of get your hands on to get that experience. But now, if you just want to focus on doing the story campaign, following the special icon exclamation mark quests throughout all the 4 zones, that's just about going to get you from 60 to max level. There are, of course, still many side quests, and those serve other purposes. Later in the game, you can either choose to do them right away and sort of work on those side stories, or you can leave them behind and just focus on the main story. But the point is that you no longer have to sort of guess where you need to go and what you need to get done in order to actually get all the way to max level. You can sort of just follow along the path and go through the whole story, and at the end you'll be level 70, which is a lot easier for a lot of people. A couple other things that they've taken from Final Fantasy XIV. One is going to be professions. We will talk about that because it's its own section. And the other is a more philosophical approach, and Blizzard's talked about this in a couple recent interviews, but it's the general philosophy that they are comfortable with you playing other games. So what we've seen in previous expansions, of course, are lots of features designed to get you to log in every single day, subscribe every single month, constantly be addicted to WoW, constantly be logging into WoW to complete daily and weekly things that you must do in order to keep up with player power. All of that is pretty much out the window. There's a ton of content in the game, a ton of rewards, and plenty of reason to want to continue to log in every day and stay subscribed every month, but it's no longer mandatory. It's no longer tied to player power, and the company is more philosophically comfortable with you playing WoW for a couple weeks, getting what you want to get done, and maybe going and playing another game, and then hopefully coming back for other content in WoW later. As far as Guild Wars 2 is concerned, Blizzard has stolen their flying system and created a whole feature around it called dragon riding, which we will also talk about as a section in this video. And one other little thing that they took from Guild Wars 2 is finally making it so that PvP gear standardizes everybody's sort of power inside of PvP areas. So there are some differences between rare PvP gear and epic PvP gear, and some PvP gear does have a higher item level. You know, that's going to be the difference between honor gear and conquest gear. However, if you have honor gear in every single one of your slots, all of those slots will increase to the highest possible PvP item level in a PvP zone, meaning that you no longer have to sort of grind PvE gear to PvP. You no longer have to upgrade your PvP gear with honor to get the higher item level in PvP. So all PvP gear at its base level is the highest possible item level for that sort of section of PvP gear. And it's great. It means that you don't have to farm 60,000 honor just to get your PvP gear to the base sort of PvP eye level. And so this is great. This really flattens the levels the bar, levels the playing field for anybody that wants to jump into PvP. You can sort of just get the baseline honor gear and jump right in, and you're already pretty much maximum item level. The second reason you should come back to the game is dragon riding. It's so much fun. Everybody talks about it. You can call it dragon riding, dragon flying. It's actually called dragon riding in the game, but it doesn't matter what you call it. It's effectively the new travel system in the game. Now, it is a sort of build around or box feature for Dragonflight. We will have to see how Blizzard sort of implements these features going forward. They've talked a lot about wanting to continue to bring build around features forward into new expansions. But obviously dragon riding is pretty central to the theme of the Dragon Isles and the Dragonflight expansion as a whole. So we'll have to see how they adapt that and move forward with it. But for now, we've got a couple years with dragon riding on the horizon, and it is an incredibly fun feature. So if you don't know, they pulled a lot of that from Guild Wars 2. Guild Wars 2 has a flying system that works similar to dragon riding. But what makes dragon riding so fun is the incredible speed that it has. So you're getting up to, I think, 834% flight speed, which is obviously significantly higher than the 310% that we've been used to with our normal flying mounts. And the other thing that it does is really opens up the game for exploration. The Dragon Isles are absolutely massive. The sheer distance that you have to travel from one side of a zone to another is immense, and the way that they have mixed dragon riding into that aspect and into the exploration aspect is phenomenal. There's lots of stuff on the ground, whether it's collecting, whether it's gathering professions, like mining or herbalism, or just stopping to pick up expedition scout packs, which are, just the little chests that they have all around the map. They've got lots of good little goodies in there that you want to stop and get. And then, of course, there's the dragon riding glyphs, which float around the world. And as you collect the glyphs, you are able to utilize those in a talent tree specific to dragon riding. And as you fill out that talent tree, you gain a lot of features that make you faster, recover resources more quickly. And sort of once you max out that talent tree, which you can do in like 45 minutes, it really doesn't take that long. I did it, I think, the first night the expansion came out. That's just like what I focused on, was maxing out dragon riding. And once it's maxed out, you can pretty much go anywhere, do anything at incredible speeds. There's all kinds of time trials and races and all these other elements that they've built into the game. And it's ultimately just a super fun feature. Most people seem to really be enjoying it. And as far as I can tell, most people are very much hopeful that this becomes the new normal for flying. Obviously, some players want the traditional flying where you can just move around like you're swimming. Blizzard have said that they will allow for that later in the expansion. Obviously, people have hundreds of mounts that they want to use. They don't want to just be limited to the same 4 dragons. I get that. So Blizzard is going to allow for that, but just be wary that it's a super fun feature, and it's enough of a reason really to check out the expansion on its own. Number 3 is going to be professions. So Blizzard have, of course, stolen a lot of core concepts from Final Fantasy XIV with professions. This is, of course, with the intent of making professions a little bit more like a full fleshed out class, or a fully fleshed out section of the game that you can play independently from PvE and PvP. It doesn't go quite as far as Final Fantasy insofar as making the professions actually like classes. So if you haven't played Final Fantasy XIV, you can be like a warrior or a cook. And those are kind of like the same thing. Those are both different classes that you can switch in and out of. WoW has sort of kept professions as like its own thing. It's still its own thing. You can still only have 2 primary professions, and then of course the secondaries: cooking, archaeology, and first aid. But they have gone pretty far with the system. So there's all kinds of different quality levels, all kinds of different aspects of like the different specs that you can have within a profession. And there's, of course, crafting orders. So there's a much more robust system now for if a player needs something made, they can't just go to any leather worker or any blacksmith. They actually need to find somebody that spent the time and invested the resources into a specific path of that profession. And then they can, of course, send them a work order, which allows them to craft items for other people using those other people's soulbound regions. So the way crafting works now is there's, of course, a lot of stuff that you can sell on the auction house and trade around, lots of different materials in that sense. But there are very core soulbound crafting materials now that ultimately allow Blizzard to sort of control and balance the market of what's available to be crafted, because there's a limitation on the soulbound regions that you can grab. But if you have soulbound regions, you can create a crafting order for a specialized crafter, and then they can go in and use your soulbound regions to create your item for you. And it's a very awesome system. I don't want to get too deep into it, but just know that if professions is something that you've always felt had more potential, like this is it, and it is literally worth coming back and checking it out. It's so much fun. It's really cool seeing the community be like really active in trade chat, putting out public and private orders, working on different talent trees and specs. We're still early enough in the expansion where nobody is able to earn all of the specialization points, whatever they're called, the different knowledge points. Nobody has that many of them yet, and so people are still very actually limited in their specializations. I suspect that as the expansion goes on, people will have more of those resources and will sort of fill out their talent tree and be spec'd into everything. And who knows, maybe with different patches, they might add new specs or new sort of like levels to the specs and stuff like that. We'll have to wait and see. But it is a very robust system. And going into it, with a lot of these features that we've seen from Blizzard before, a great example is like garrisons, right? Garrisons we thought were going to be this awesome thing with all these special features. You were going to be able to customize your garrison. It was going to be like player housing. You were going to be able to get all kinds of items. And right, we built it up in our heads to be this cool thing. And Blizzard really sold it to us as this amazing thing. And then we got there and it was really just kind of like a quest hub / resource management thing with very little customization, and just a lot of the features that were built into the garrisons didn't ultimately permeate out into the world or offer players too much of anything interesting. And what I found with the professions is that going into it, I suspected that a lot of the things like quality, for example, on the different materials and stuff was just gonna kind of not matter, right? It felt like one of those things that Blizzard would develop where, there's all these different nuances and things that you can worry about, but everybody's just only going to want the top quality, or everybody's going to instantly be able to make the top quality, or whatever. For whatever reason, I anticipated that none of that was going to really matter, that players were just going to sort of brute force their way out of caring about that. And ultimately, that hasn't been the case. There's actually reason to want lower quality items over higher quality items based on cost, and the ability to craft higher quality items using stats like inspiration and stuff, where there's like a % chance to do a better job at crafting something. It all actually really comes into play and actually matters, and people are being specific about what level of quality they want when they reach out in trade chat for different private crafting orders. They're saying, I want to pay less, I only need this one, or I want the maxed out thing, I'm going to pay 30K commission and whatever. So it's actually very cool to see all of those things having a purpose. Reason number 4 is maybe the most important reason of all, and that is that there is no borrowed power in this expansion. Now, if you're like me and hundreds of thousands of other players, over the last few WoW expansions, you've gotten sick and tired of the AP grind, right? Whether it's Azerite power or artifact power, or as Blizzard has cleverly dropped into this expansion as kind of a joke, a spectral power. There is no more AP, there's no more infinite grind, there's no more special currency that you need to worry about grinding out, there's no Torghast that you have to do every 2 weeks to get your legendary. All of that shit is out the window. Blizzard has been very clear in interviews that this is something that they have heard for the last 6 years and have finally gotten to the point in their development cycle where they're actually able to make those changes and stop serving us those full build around borrowed power systems. And that's just fantastic. Some newer players may have only ever known borrowed power systems, and going into an expansion that doesn't have any can feel weird. But of course, any veteran player that's been playing for more than 10 years will know that the game used to just be fun. You used to play the game just to have fun, right? And if you wanted to be a competitive raider or a competitive PvPer, that was fine. There were avenues for you to do that. But if you just wanted to farm transmog, farm mounts, hang out with your friends, do a dungeon, do a normal raid, whatever, you could sort of just do that and then log out. And if you really wanted to grind the game and do a lot, and you were addicted to the game, or addicted has like a negative connotation, but you were actively playing the game as your main game, then there were avenues for you to do stuff. You could go farm mounts, you could go farm transmogs, you could go back and do old content. There were lots of different things to occupy your time with. You didn't need these mandatory elements that were forcing you to log in every morning to get a minimum requirement done. You just sort of played as much as you wanted to play, and it was a video game. And we are back to that, and it feels good. So this week, my shaman is fully capped on everything. He's cleared the normal raid. He's capped on conquest points. He's got maxed out gear. He's got full enchants and gems, everything he needs. And it's Saturday, and I don't have to play him anymore. I can go play alts now. I can work on renown and farm different cosmetic items. I can work on dragon riding stuff if I want to do that. I can log out and play another game or not think about WoW. Oh my God. Can you believe it? So we are back to that point where the game has a tremendous amount of content, a tremendous amount of rewards, but almost none of them, in fact, basically none of them are mandatory. So if you want to keep up in terms of player power, all you have to do is content, right? If you want Mythic Plus gear, all you have to do is Mythic Plus. If you want raid gear, all you have to do is raid. If you want a PvP, all you have to do is PvP. If you want to farm cosmetics and do reputation grinds, all you have to do is farm cosmetics and reputation grinds. If you only want to do professions, all you have to do is just professions. Okay? There's no legendaries. There's no Torghast. There's no thing that you have to log in and do. There's no mandatory weekly currency system that you have to keep up with. And if you miss a week, then you fall behind. There's none of that. You can just log in, play the parts of the game that interest you, ignore the parts of the game that don't interest you. And then when you're done playing, you can log out. And it's just an incredible feeling. And I'm so glad to just have the game feel like a video game again and not this job that's designed to keep you hooked and constantly logging in. That leads us into reason number 5, which might sound similar, but actually is much more broad, which is that there's no more fun police. So one issue that Blizzard's had for many years is that they develop fun content, but they don't allow players to enjoy that content, right? So they create this game that it's got all the combat elements that people like. The classes are fun, specs are fun. Let's look at Legion, for example. There's these artifact weapons, kind of a cool feature, got people excited. There's these things to do. What people suffer from are things like time-gated content, and more subtle things like just the way that they design abilities and things like that. It's all about limiting players, right? Everything that Blizzard's done in the last few years has been about saying, okay, players are going to do all of these different things that we don't want them doing. So what we're going to do is we're going to place all of these carefully crafted restrictions around the game and make it so that players are only playing the game specifically how we want them to play it, because we need to hit certain targets, or we need to hit certain metrics, or whatever their reasoning was. And so, we're going to make it so that no fun rewards come from Torghast. Torghast becomes mandatory. We're going to make sure everybody does Torghast by making it mandatory for the legendary resources, and we're going to time gate it. So you're going to do exactly 2 every week. And if you really like Torghast, doing more than 2 is a waste of your fucking time. And if you hate Torghast, it doesn't matter. You can't just do it once. You have to do it twice. This is an example of fun police where Torghast itself, right? The actual tower and the content of running around in a roguelike style scenario where you're gaining lots of power as you go. This was a very popular feature in alpha and beta. It had some cosmetic gear rewards. It let your character gain power very quickly and sort of get to insane combinations of power and stuff on your character. And it was seen as this very, very fun feature that people were super excited about. And then Blizzard got their fun police hands on it, and they completely neutered it. They took away all the fun cosmetic rewards and made it just focused on the legendary currency that you had to have. And then they didn't make it optional. They made it mandatory. So again, if you loved Torghast and you were having super amounts of fun, you were still kind of an idiot for doing it more than twice a week, right? Because you need to come back next Tuesday and do it twice again. So you might as well, even though you're having fun, you might as well save it and not have fun until next Tuesday. Whereas if you just wanted to do Torghast one time, no, you got to do it twice. And if you really hated Torghast, then you had to choose between doing something you hate doing and having a legendary that was basically mandatory to do any Mythic Plus or rating content if you wanted to do content with your friends. And that's super uncool. So Blizzard's gotten rid of a lot of that fun police stuff. Time gates, aside from sort of like game breaking time gates, like making sure that you can only get one piece of high end crafted gear per week through the Spark of Ingenuity resources for crafting materials, having weekly raid lockouts, like parts of the game that have always been there. Those sorts of time gates obviously still exist, because if they didn't, then the game would sort of crumble. But the time gates on all the things that you want to do for fun are gone. So there's no time gates on like the renown system. So if you wanted to ignore the rest of the game and just farm all the reputation and cosmetic rewards and do side quests and do all of that stuff, like, you can do it endlessly. You can just go farm it all until you're done, until all of that content is complete. There's no weekly time gate. Nothing's going to stop you and say, you've done too many side quests this week, you must pause. It's not like Renown in Shadowlands, where it was a time gated thing where every week you would log in, you would complete the quest, and then you would get a new renown point and it would move you forward. It's not like that anymore. Renown now is just a more visually interesting and more enjoyable version of Reputation, but there's no time gates or limits. So if you just want to go farm Valdrakken rep, because max Valdrakken rep at 25 has a mount that you just love, and that's all you're interested in getting right now, you can just go do that. You can just go farm constantly world quests and side quests and whatever other content you can get your hands on that will just unlock Valdrakken rep. And so you can just grind that out. And so there are all these elements where there's just no fun police in the game anymore. Something else that I've noticed is that this philosophy has sort of made its way down into certain abilities. So, for example, right now I'm playing a Resto Shaman. I've played a Resto Shaman all the way since late TBC, early Wrath. I've played effectively every iteration of Resto Shaman that there's ever been, so I'm pretty familiar with their abilities and what their abilities can and can't do. And one thing that Shaman have always dealt with is shields and overriding shields. So you've got, of course, Water Shield and Lightning Shield, as well as Earth Shield. And so Lightning Shield is going to be the shield that you have on as a DPS player usually. Water Shield, of course, is the more healer-focused shield because it returns mana. And then, of course, Earth Shield is the one that actually heals you. And traditionally, Earth Shield has only been available to the Restoration Shaman specialization. Well, in the new talent trees, they've actually made Earth Shield something that you can spec into as any Shaman. So now all Shaman have the ability to access Earth Shield. But one other issue that Shaman have always had is that the shields overwrite each other. So if you put an Earth Shield on a player and someone else, another Resto Shaman, like in a Battleground, for example, puts their Earth Shield on a player, it'll overwrite it. It'll delete your Earth Shield and put their Earth Shield on. Or if you yourself as the Shaman have Water Shield on and you Earth Shield yourself, it will overwrite your Water Shield. Now, there have been different times in different expansions where you've been allowed to have both Earth Shield and Water Shield on at the same time as a Resto Shaman. That's come sort of in and out of existence, but the concept of non-Resto Shaman having an Earth Shield and being able to stack multiple Earth Shields on the same character. So, for example, if you have 3 Resto Shaman in a group, you can put all 3 of their Earth Shields on the same tank or on the same other player, and all 3 will stack. So they'll all run at the same time, which is incredible. And let's say I'm a Resto Shaman, I can Water Shield myself, Earth Shield myself, and get an Earth Shield from a DPS Shaman put on me as well. Not only that, but Earth Shield's actually usable on the Shaman and another player if you're Restoration. So I can actually Earth Shield both myself and the tank and run 2 Earth Shields simultaneously and keep my Water Shield up. So again, that was a little nitty gritty and everything like that, but this general philosophy of just sort of letting things work in a more fun way and then taking that fun way and balancing around that. So instead of saying, oh, Resto Shaman are imbalanced, let's put restrictions on them. Let's limit their ability by making it overwrite or making it less powerful or making it not stack. Instead of taking that sort of negative solution approach where you limit and restrict because something is too powerful, instead you just let it be the fun way. Let players have access to all the iterations, and let players stack it and do whatever, and then just tune it so that it's not overpowered, through number tuning. And that seems to be the approach they've taken. So all around, Blizzard seems to have completely gotten over the fun police thing that they've been doing for the last 8 years. And you can just sort of play the game how you want to play it. There's no time gates on anything other than, again, what is normal and natural, like weekly lockouts and stuff. But yeah, you can just go farm the game and you can just play what you're interested in. Number 6, you've heard me mention it a couple times. It's talent trees. They are back, baby. So, of course, Blizzard has learned a lot from the popularity of Classic WoW. One thing that players have been extremely vocal about is loving those classic talent trees and wanting those talent trees back. Now, Blizzard has said for years the reason that they don't have these old talent trees is because, adding 2% crit or whatever is not a fun choice or what have you. But they kind of ate their own words, redeveloped the talent tree system. It is far more robust now. Chances are, if you're watching this video, you've at least seen like a picture or something of the Dragonflight talent trees. They are far more robust than the previous trees. They actually have they're actually designed like a tree. So you can really kind of go left, down the middle, or right. It's not like the old trees where it was like the top and the bottom were one and it was pretty much a straight shot down, and you could kind of like go one of these two paths and connect back at the bottom. Those are like the classic talent trees. They were very narrow and very vertical. These talent trees are very wide and very horizontal. And you can kind of go in one direction or the other. And also, some of the individual talents themselves are a choice between two talents. So we've been seeing Blizzard do this a lot in sort of their sub-talent trees with different systems and stuff. They've been trying this, but now we finally got it in the actual class talents where you can choose from an ability or a passive talent or two abilities or two passives, whatever they put in there. And, again, while players will always do what they always do and go to Wowhead and click the cookie cutter build that they're told to, if you're not that kind of player, or if you are more of a cutting edge player, there's actually a lot of room for you to do whatever you want to do. And not only that, they've finally added the ability to store multiple talent builds for the same spec, up to, I believe the limit is 10 right now. So you can build yourself a PvP spec, a PvE spec, a world questing spec. Or if you're really hardcore, like let's say you're a raider or an M+, you can have, if there's 10 different dungeons and you're an M+ player, you can have a different spec for every dungeon. Maybe that matters, or maybe different specs for different bosses, stuff like that. So there's actually a lot of power there. If you just want to be the cookie cutter type person, you can go to Wowhead and you can click the same buttons they click, but it isn't quite as narrow as the classic talent trees are, where it's like, well, if you don't click on this, you're like giving up 5% DPS. There are of course some of those options in there, but there is more freedom from a utility standpoint to actually pick and choose and be a little bit more clever, especially with jumping between things like AoE and single target. Number 7, you've heard me mention it a couple times. It's Renown. So reputation works a little bit differently than it has in the past. Now, if you are a rep farmer, then you'll be happy to know there are still traditional reps in the game. There's not that many of them. I think there's only like 2 or 3, but there are traditional reputations in the game, and there are traditional dailies and things like that. However, what Blizzard has done is they've taken the Renown system from Shadowlands, mostly just the visual aspects of that. So they've taken what worked with Renown, which was the fact that it gave you rewards as you progressed, and the fact that it had like a nice visual interface. Those were like the two things that worked with Renown. The thing that sucked with Renown was, again, the fun police time gating, where everyone always had the exact same Renown for their Covenant because it was time gated. So you could only get a specific amount of Renown points per week, and there were catch-up mechanics, but if you were capped with the rest of the community, everybody was stuck on, rank 18 Renown this week, and the next week we get rank 19, and the next week we get rank 20, and that was how it worked, and that wasn't super fun. What they've done is they've taken traditional reputations and the things that worked about Shadowlands Renown and combine them into what is effectively a new feature. Now, it's called Renown, but it's basically reputations, and it works differently than either of those systems have in any previous expansion. So the long and short of it is that as you go through the world, as you complete side quests or main quests or world quests or whatever, you're going to gain renown for the faction associated with the zone that you're in. So there's 4 zones in the expansion, and there's 4 renowns. So each zone is associated with its renown. If you really want to hone in and focus on one renown and sort of bum rush your bar for them, you can just go to that zone and really hunker down on, like, I'm going to do every single side quest. I'm going to knock out every world quest that spawns in this zone. I'm going to do the dungeons that are in this zone. You know, you can really focus, or you can take a more sort of generalized approach and just get renown at whatever pace you get it from sort of naturally going about your business and doing the things that you want to do in the game. What's most important is that the rewards from renown are largely separated from player power. Now, a couple caveats to that are there's a couple 389 item level pieces that you can get, which it's like slightly better than what you're getting from like Mythic 0, but still not as good as like what you're getting from a raid. So yeah, you could argue that for ultra high end players, there might be a slight onus on those players to force rush those renowns and get those pieces, but I haven't seen anyone do that. Gear comes from so many different places now and is so obtainable now that it doesn't seem to feel like anybody's been forced into doing that yet. And a couple of other things are profession recipes. So obviously if there's a specific recipe or something that somebody really wants, that's going to be a reason for them to hunker down on that renown. But by and large, the renown rewards are cosmetic or related to dragon riding or whatever, or, you know, they unlock mounts, stuff like that. Stuff that you're used to seeing as reputation rewards, but generally just like more fun and less targeted and less, it's not like, oh, I have to go farm these 10 dailies in this area every day because this renown has a ring that my class absolutely has to have. It's not like that. It's more just like, oh, Iskar rep has some mounts that I'm interested in. So I'm going to make sure that I knock out every world quest in the Azure span so that way I can maximize the amount of Iskar rep that I'm getting, or something like that. I haven't actually like forced myself into doing any renown farming or anything. I'm just sort of going with what I get naturally. And the best part is that even though it's not account wide, which it should be, it is a really nice passive feature where if you don't feel compelled to engage with it directly, it is fun to sort of just open up your renown and be like, oh yeah, I got a new renown level here. Like, let me go look through those rewards and see like, oh, that the horn option for the blue dragon riding mount that I've really wanted comes from this and it's only 2 renown levels away. Okay, I'm going to remember that and like focus on my centaur rep so that I can get those rewards next week instead of 2 weeks from now or something like that. But again, all super optional, all super chill. Reason number 8. Now, this one is probably the smallest of all the reasons, but it was something that I just wanted to bring up as an interesting thing that I haven't seen before, which is that they've added lots of gear that it's not PvP gear, it's not raid gear, and it's not dungeon gear. It's like world gear. So there's actually whole sets of gear that are just from a special currency from world PvP. And there are whole sets of gear that are just from a special currency from world PvE. There's like a event right now called Primal Storms or whatever. That's where the currency comes from. But the point is that they've actually added, instead of doing something like Torghast, for example, where you don't really get anything except these mandatory, you get your legendary that you have to have or whatever, to sort of fill out the content in the game and offer players, other transmogs, other interesting things to do, other ways to spend their time. There are these alternative currencies for world PvP and world PvE that allow you to get totally unique armor sets, and do totally new forms of content. And ultimately, if you are that type of player who is more solo driven and you choose not to engage in those group raids, group Mythic Plus, group PvP, and you really are just like more like a world quest type player, that sort of like solo casual player that just wants to go around and sort of like explore the world and do the content in the world, this is like the best expansion for you ever, right? Between the World PvP and World PvE specialized sets, specialized content, there's specialized bosses. In addition to that, there's of course all the renowned stuff that you can do. And so there's just like an immense amount of content now for players who don't engage with what we would call like traditional WoW endgame content. And I just think that's really cool. Now, reason number 9 hasn't quite been added. This is a feature that's coming in 10.0.5, and this is going to be in about a month from when this video goes up. So I think we're looking into like mid to late January. But it's going to be the trading post. The way the trading post is sort of set up and the way it's offered to players, it's kind of organized like a battle pass, but before you freak out, it's not a battle pass, and you don't have to pay anything extra like you do with everything else to get access to it. So the trading post is a feature that they're adding in the next half patch, and essentially what it sounds like is that they're going to make it kind of like the black market auction house, but instead of for gold, there's like special currency just for the trading post. So what you can imagine is that they will have special transmog pets, mounts, items, toys, all of that. They'll develop new stuff for the trading post and have old stuff come back and have stuff from the stores. So what you're looking at is each month, you'll go to the trading post and it will have a set amount of things available in the store. They will cost a dedicated trading post currency. This currency will be awarded for logging in and then doing special content for the trading post. So the trading post will have its own quests. It'll say, go out into the world and do X, and you can go do these quests or do these events. You know, they haven't been ultra specific with how it's going to work, but you know, let's say it's like any other weekly quest, like complete the raid on normal and get a set amount of currency, or complete X PvP, or complete X world quests, or maybe they'll do special events, like go do this special boss made just for the trading post. Who knows? But essentially, they're going to give you multiple avenues to earn trading post currency, and then on a monthly cycle, the inventory of the store at the trading post will rotate. Now, as far as old content is concerned, they are talking about they want to put like store mounts and stuff into the trading post. So what they're finally doing is giving players an opportunity to earn items that have previously only been available to real world money, to normal players or to players that don't want to spend extra actual real world cash. And I think this is really smart and good because obviously the WoW token has already sort of made the difference between cash and gold a much more blurred line. But there are, of course, players that might want the Celestial Steed that don't think it's worth $25 of their hard-earned cash. So if they really want that mount in particular, but they don't want to pay, now there's this other method in the game where they can finally earn the currency and actually go get that mount. So you're going to see new and old transmogs, mounts, pets, toys, items, whatever. And that's just going to be a really nice way for players to continue to engage with the game and continue to maybe earn older items or things that they otherwise wouldn't have access to. My favorite thing about this is that it has a feature where you can, if there's an item that you really, really want, it's finally come up on rotation and you're like, oh my God, I've been waiting 15 years to own these shoulders or something like that, but you don't have the trading post currency that you need. They will give you a slot that locks rotation for an item. So if there's a mount that comes up or something that you have been desperate to get your hands on, but you are 2 months short of earning the trading post currency to afford it, then for those 2 months, you can actually drag it into a little box and lock it so that it does not rotate out of the inventory specifically for you. So that's great. You know, if you see something, a heavy hitter, a big prize that you really want, you actually aren't going to get punished for just it rotating out at the end of the month. You'll actually be able to save it, store it, and earn it at a later time, which I think is really cool. And number 10, the final reason that you should play Dragonflight is the new Evoker class. It's actually kind of sweet. Now, I'm not a massive fan of the DPS spec. Basically, the way that the cast and hold abilities work on the Evoker, they they don't play well with button mashing. Because if you actually double press the key, then it will auto use the ability at the first section of the channel. So what I found is that as a DPS player, I don't love that because I end up misusing a lot of my abilities by accident. But if that's not a problem for you, then it's not a problem for you. But what I've been enjoying is healing. So I just got my Evoker to 70 recently, and I've been healing. And it's quite interesting because unlike Demon Hunter and even unlike Monk, which... And it's interesting because unlike other classes that they've added over time, you know, we got the Death Knight, and the Death Knight fit really well into the game. It had its own, its own power systems with the runes and the runic power. Obviously, it took them a number of years to sort of flesh that out and make it not cumbersome and stuff. But the Death Knight really felt like a fully fledged class when it came out. It had sort of everything that the other classes had, the same number of buttons, the same complexity, that kind of stuff. And Monk was very much the same way. Now, I never have loved Monk personally. I kind of like Mistweaver healing, but it's just not really my aesthetic. But Monk also has always been a really fleshed out class. You know, it's got all three of the different specs: tank, healer, and DPS. It's got pretty unique abilities, obviously some big ones like Karma and stuff that no one else has. And it is always, to me, DK and Monk have always felt like actual classes in WoW that were really full classes. Demon Hunter, however, was the first iteration where I was like, oh, this is what we're doing. So Demon Hunter, the fact that it only had 2 specs instead of 3, already felt like a little weak to me. And just like, if you couldn't think of 3 specs, maybe this shouldn't be a whole class, right? Maybe you should have done Tinkerer or something more interesting. But the other problem that I have with Demon Hunters is that like so many of their abilities are basically the same thing. It's just like /1/2 AoE /4, right? Like it is what it is. Okay. But you'll notice, especially, and you know, they've grown over the years since Legion, and they've become a more fully fleshed out class over time. But Demon Hunters had way fewer abilities than other classes. So going into Evoker, that was a big concern of mine. Was, are we going to do another neutered new class? A new class that's sort of aimed at newer players, that's kind of button mashy. Very limited in scope in terms of the number of abilities that it actually has access to, and the theme overall. And when I saw that it was only 2 specs again, I got really concerned. I was like, this is what they're doing again. Now, obviously, healer and DPS as opposed to tank and DPS. Evoker to me seemed like they could have done another tank. They could have done 2 DPS classes, or specs rather. So I was definitely concerned, like, okay, this is just going to be another Demon Hunter, basically. A magic spell-casting Demon Hunter. So I was pretty concerned that there wouldn't be anything particularly unique that the Evoker brought to the table. And the other thing about Demon Hunter, what made it fun was that it was like fun to physically play, because it has the dash that actually dashes wherever you are in the air horizontally. And you have 2 of them, plus you had the double jump, plus you had the wings. So actually playing a Demon Hunter and like going around the world doing world quests sort of, or even like raiding or anything, pretty fun on a Demon Hunter, because it's just fun to be on. It's just an interesting class to move around on. It has the most maneuverability really of any class, or sort of the most unique movement of any class in the game. And so I always saw it as sort of gimmicky, because what made the class interesting, fun, and good was stuff that doesn't actually apply to combat, or has utility in combat, but is more about like, ooh, I'm having fun running around the world, as opposed to like, okay, I'm doing this really complex like rotation or like using all these abilities in PvP or whatever. So what has been interesting about Evoker is this sort of mid-range focus that they've taken. Now, as a DPS, I kind of see them playing more as just like a closer range mage. I don't really see them like jumping into melee to do melee stuff. You know, it's not quite like Mistweaver Monk, where, you know, you're running and punching and doing damage and healing people through that and like all of that. It's not quite like that. So the DPS very much just feels like a mage that has shorter range. Not super big fan of the DPS spec, but healing, I've had a great time. And what is interesting about the healing is that because it is a mid-range class, you can't. I'm also a PvPer, so it's a little bit different, but you can't heal the same way you heal as like on a shaman or a priest, where you're standing behind a pillar and you're sort of shooting spells out to the left and to the right, and you're managing everything in sort of a triangle where you're constantly rotating to, you know, cast your CC ability this way on the healer and get your healing ability off this way on your guy. You know, you're very much playing this sort of like long distance positional game. And as an evoker healer, you can't really do that. Your heals don't reach. So you sort of have to be in the mix. And whether you're doing a 5-man dungeon or you're in a battleground or something like that, or even in an arena, there's a lot of times where you actually need to be in the middle, in the midst of the combat, but still kiting, still sort of like keeping your distance and everything like that. And there's an ability with a 17-second cooldown that makes your character, makes the evoker fly to your ally and heal them. And so you find yourself using this a lot, and actually you have this very mobile style of healing, where if you're playing with a bunch of ranged classes, so if you're in a dungeon with like a warlock and a mage, or in an arena with like a warlock and a mage, they are, not everybody is fully aware of the limitations of evoker in terms of distance and sort of needing everybody to be in front of the evoker to get its AoE abilities off, because a lot of evoker healing comes from AoE. So you'll find in those situations where people aren't necessarily playing the way you need them to play, that you're sort of like jumping around and going to the mage and then healing the mage and then jumping over to the warlock and healing the warlock. And so it's this very active, movement focused style of healing, which I think is super interesting. So it is kind of funny when you click to make the class, it says that it is an advanced class, the first one in the game to be marked advanced, and you have to type all caps advanced to be able to make the character. So they, unlike the Demon Hunter, really went the other direction with this one and said, hey, there's some stuff you got to learn how to play this. You can't just jump, even as a veteran player, you really can't just jump onto an evoker and play it the same way you've played all the other classes, because it has a lot of unique abilities, a lot of stuff that they just invented for evoker, and it's a lot of fun. But yeah, like I said, you gotta play mid-range. There's no mid-range classes in the game. You know, the closest thing is probably Survival Hunter, but even that's gone pretty much full melee at this point. And they've tried to do these mid-range classes before, these mid-range specs, and it's always kind of failed, right? Outlaw Rogue, Survival Hunter, they've always just sort of said, okay, we tried that, but players didn't really like it, so we're just gonna, you know, make Survival all melee, or we're just gonna make Outlaw have a couple gun abilities, but still be a normal rogue. And so it hasn't really worked out, but by crafting the entire class around that concept instead of just trying to force a spec into that playstyle, they finally sort of nailed it, and given the full toolkit needed to have that style of play. So it's super interesting. So that's my video, guys. Thank you for watching. That is the top 10 reasons to come back to play WoW. There will be another video specifically on PvP. As a PvP player, that's really what I care about and what I want to talk about most. But I just wanted to make this video for anybody who got burned in the past with some previous expansions. Obviously, anyone who was super excited for Shadowlands coming off of BFA's failure, as like we've always joked about the one good expansion, one bad expansion alternation, and Shadowlands was supposed to be the good expansion, and then it wasn't. And so I know for a lot of people, you've just kind of been burned. And even though you might have heard people saying, "Oh, Dragonflight's good, you're unconvinced, right?" So there's a lot of people that haven't given Dragonflight a chance simply because they've been burned too many times. What I'm here to say is Blizzard really does seem to be turning over a new leaf. You can watch great interviews with them, with Preach and everything, talking about how leadership's changed. The general staff has changed. A lot of the company internal culture has changed, and also the way that they are responding to player feedback and stuff like that is completely different as well. We're seeing class balance changes come way faster, way more accurate, right? They're actually good changes instead of like some of the stuff we've seen in the past where it's like they nerf an ability by 50%. And it's like, wait, are you even balancing the game? Are you just guessing? Like 50%, shouldn't it? We should be tinkering with tiny percentages here. 50% means you don't even know what you're doing. So we're seeing a lot less of that. We're seeing a lot more 3%, 5%, 10% changes, a lot more control over class balance and stuff like that. A lot more instant feedback from Blizzard saying, we hear you on this, or we're actually going to change this or whatever. But generally the philosophy in the game is so much better. I'm having such a good time. It's the first time I've had a character like capped out before the end of the week on everything, probably in like 10 years, because I just haven't cared about the game, and all the borrowed power systems have been such a disgusting, nasty feeling. I hate the game forcing me to log in to like meet weekly requirements and stuff. Blah, it's just gross. So playing the game for fun and then logging out when I'm done having fun has been a great feeling. And if you think that that might be you as well, I encourage you to buy the game, download it, and give it a shot. Thanks so much, guys, and we'll see you next time. Howdy, folks. Hope you enjoyed that video. If so, please drop a like. Consider subscribing to the YouTube channel and join us in the live stream. That's twitch.tv/Mr. Tovarish, Monday through Thursday, 7 p.m. Eastern. Hope to see you there.